Alright, so this one is tuned down a quarter step, so keep that in mind. So we're going to play G and E. Now on our G chord, we're going to be using that third fret on the E string as a bass note before we play the rest of the chord. And when I say the rest of the chord, it's just the open D and G strings predominantly. Now you do hear some of those other strings in there as well, especially on the last verse. So, he's just kind of focused on those open D and G strings, and you hear that B and E bleed through a little bit, even before the last verse. So, and the other thing is that he never plays this the same way twice during the song, especially on the G chord. The pattern is always different. So you have to pay attention to when we go back to that third fret on the E string, or our G note there, is the base of the pattern. So the first time we play it, we're going to hear something like, and then the second time you're going to hear, and then the third time, and then the fourth time you're going to hear, so that's just some examples of how that pattern's always a little bit different. And then on the second verse, you're going to hear me throw this little riff in there. So we have, and that's just hammer on to that second fret on the D string. So you still have this open D and G string. Hammer onto that second fret and then back to those open D and G. So, those are the parts on the G chord. And then when we move to the E chord, you hear that open E two times. I think maybe the first time you only hear it once, but you're gonna just G to the third fret on the E string to open E. And then you're going to come down here and play the third fret on the little E and the B string. And you're going to slide from 3 to 5 and then back. Like that, right? So sometimes you'll hear him hit it, just once. And I think I did it just once the entire time, but and then it kind of dies out on him. But then sometimes he'll hit it again when he comes back up here to keep the momentum going on that. And for me, this is the hardest part of the song to play, is trying to get that to sound right. But when you do play this strings, you're going to go back up here to this open E, kind of as your bass note like you did on your G chord. So when we have this transition, and then you hit open E again, and then open E again. Now, I did some upstrokes on that. I don't know if it's upstrokes or not. It sounds like it might be all downstrokes on this. But you're going to be using that open E as your bass note again. So the second time we go to E, we're going to hit that. And then we're going to play just this third fret on the B string first. And then open E. And then open E. All right, so those are all the main parts for the main riff, and then we're going to get to the pre-chorus where we're going to play this lick. So that's second fret on the D, open D, second fret on the A, third fret on the E to open E. And then we're going to hit open E again. And then we're playing that E7th chord down here, okay? And that repeats a few times, and then we're gonna have, just as the chorus is kind of winding up, so that's just 3 notes. So that's second fret on the D to G, open D to G. Right? So those are all the main parts for the song. So let's take a look at the guitar solo and then that outro riff. So for the guitar solo, you know, I thought, you know, we went up here to G and we did this. You know, something like that, or at least played the chord. But when you really listen to that isolated track, it sounds like it's just the note, just the bass note. So that's just what I did. So that pattern is basically, you know, we're going to play 3, and then we're going to walk to 4 to 5, or we're going to walk to 5, 4 to 5, and then 5, 6, and 7, and then 7 to 8, and then we're going to go down here to 10, and then end it on 11. So right? So that's really what it sounds like he's doing during the guitar solo. And then, of course, we go back into the, you know, that thing again. So that's it for all the main parts. So let's take a look at that outro. All right, so for the outro, we're just going to maintain that G shape. And it sounds like it cuts in like right when he's playing the bass note on the G chord. But we're going to have our open D and G, and we're finger picking this too, by the way. So we have open D and G, hammer onto that 2nd fret on the D. To open G string, 3rd fret on the B. And then we're going to hammer on again here. Now we're at D. So all together, and then we're just going back to that D. And then back, we're going to end that on that open G's 3rd fret on the B. So. And then we're going to go back to D. All right, so then you hear that E, open E 3 times, and you hear the, and then open D, 2nd fret on the D, 3rd fret on the E, slight bend. All right, so that's the first time. And the second time, we're going to start it off the same way. But now we're going to start here. All right, and then it just kind of fades out. And you kind of hear another slide in there, and you know it starts to fade out a little bit. So anyway, that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.